Most careers are held together by a single assumption. The assumption is that hard work protects you, that if you stay late, deliver clean output, fix what other people break, and carry more than your share, the organization will notice and cover you when something goes wrong. It will not. In most workplaces, visibility is not protection and reliability is not safety. The people who fix the most problems are the same people standing closest to those problems when someone needs a name to attach to the failure. They are not picked because they are weak. They are picked because they are available, responsible, and unlikely to fight back. What follows is a breakdown of 11 specific traps that turn good employees into blame containers, how each one actually works, and what it takes to avoid them without torching your own career in the process. Scapegoating is not a personal event. It is a system output. Organizations under pressure need two things at the same time. They need problems solved fast, and they need blame distributed cleanly when those solutions fail. These two needs pull against each other constantly. The employees who solve problems fast are the same employees who end up standing next to every high-stakes outcome, and standing next to an outcome is how your name gets written into it. Hardworking employees get targeted for three structural reasons. They are the easiest people to attach to a story because they touched the work, sent the emails, stayed late on the project, and their name is already in the paper trail. They reduce organizational noise by fixing things silently, which means leadership never sees the original dysfunction. Leadership only sees a smooth surface with one person standing on it, and when the surface cracks, only one person is visible. Finally, they are the safest targets. They rarely retaliate, they rarely escalate, they rarely go to HR, they rarely threaten to leave in a way that costs anyone anything. They absorb. This is not a theory about bad managers, although bad managers exist. It is a structural fact. Blame does not go to the person who caused the problem. Blame goes to the person least likely to fight back. The traps that follow are the mechanics. Each one looks on the surface like an opportunity, a compliment, or a simple request. Underneath, each one is load-bearing for a system that needs someone to carry the weight of its own contradictions. Start with the reliability trap because it looks the most like kindness. A manager notices you deliver on time, that your output is clean, that nobody has to chase you. The tasks you receive start to concentrate, the deadlines that cannot slip, the clients that cannot be lost, the fires that must be contained. This feels like trust, and at first it is. Then one day your job is different, and nobody said it out loud. You are no longer a person with a defined role. You are the container the team pours urgency into when it has nowhere else to put it. Everything runs smoothly until one of those urgent items fails. Because you were the reliable one, nobody reads the failure as systemic. They read it as a rare lapse on your part, which makes it land harder than it should. Do not become unreliable. Become legible. When new urgent work shows up, ask which existing priority it is replacing and make someone answer that question in writing. Reliability without visible limits is not a strength, it is a setup. The second trap hides inside your helpfulness. You became the person who onboards new hires because you explain things clearly. The person who writes the status updates because you track details nobody else tracks. The unofficial liaison between two teams because you happen to talk to both. None of this is written down. None of it is compensated. None of it shows up in your review. The coordination belongs to the company. The compensation belongs to nobody. Then something inside one of these unofficial areas goes wrong, and suddenly the role you were never given is very much yours, responsible enough to blame, invisible enough that nobody defends you. Being seen is not the same as being protected. There's a common belief that visibility is good for your career. It is half true at best. You get the dangerous kind of visibility by being CC'd on important threads, pulled into senior meetings, asked to present updates on projects you do not formally own. It feels like access. It is exposure. Your name is attached to outcomes you cannot control, in front of people who will remember the association when something goes sideways. Senior leaders do not remember nuance. They do not remember who argued against the timeline in the hallway afterward. They remember who was in the room, who spoke, who presented the slide. If the outcome was bad, that person becomes the reference point. That's how it sticks. If you are presenting a decision you did not make, say whose decision it is, out loud, in the room, with their name attached. The 8th trap is the most unfair of the 11 because it does not involve taking on any extra work at all. It only involves being near failure when it happens. You sat next to the person who made the mistake. You were on the email chain when the bad call got approved. You attended the meeting where the timeline got set. You did not contribute to any of it. You were just there. Then the story gets reconstructed, and under pressure, the human mind does not cleanly separate who caused an event from who was standing next to it. You get pulled into more things than average because you are useful, which means your name appears in more places than average, which means your name appears next to more failures than average. Being useful is contaminating. Be deliberate about which conversations you stay in and which threads you exit. Leaving a meeting that does not need you is not disengagement, it is containment. It is a Tuesday. Your manager's replies have been getting shorter. There is less explanation in them, fewer questions back to you, fewer small jokes. A project you used to own was moved to someone else last week with no conversation. A senior person walked past your desk twice without stopping. A comment in the team meeting landed a little too pointed to be an accident. You tell yourself you are reading too much into it. You are not. Most of the real information about your standing gets delivered outside of formal reviews, and by the time the formal review catches up, the verdict has already been written for months. You were supposed to be building a defense during those months. Instead, you were waiting for a conversation that would never come. When a task moves without explanation, ask about it in writing the same day. When a comment lands strangely, follow it up one-on-one before you leave the office. Informal feedback is how corporate narratives get built, and narratives are harder to reverse than facts. The 10th trap feels like a virtue, which is why it is so hard to see. You develop a real attachment to a manager, a team, or the organization itself. You start making decisions based on what is good for the group instead of what is good for your own position. You turn down a recruiter call. You take on a project that does not advance your career because the team needs someone to take it. You defend your company to friends who work in better places. Your loyalty is absolute. The organization's memory is not. The manager you protected gets promoted out of your life. The team you built gets reorganized around new priorities. The debt you accumulated by staying through the hard years exists only in your head. Then a cost cut comes, or a leadership change, or a restructure, and the same loyalty that used to be praised in your reviews becomes evidence of poor judgment, a failure to develop options, a willingness to be overlooked. Separate loyalty to people from loyalty to positions. Take the recruiter call even when you are not looking. Loyalty that cannot be spent is not loyalty. It is captivity dressed as virtue. Refusing to help is not the answer. Dragging the informal work into formal language is. Mention it in one-on-ones. Name it in written updates. If you are doing the work of a coordinator, put the word coordinator in an email. An unofficial role is a liability with no contract. Now picture a document landing in your inbox late Friday afternoon. It is a deliverable someone else owns. It is a mess. Half the data is wrong, the framing is lazy, and the client call is Monday morning. You could send it back. You could flag it to your manager. You could walk away. You will not. You will fix it because you cannot stand watching something fail when you know how to save it. Congratulations, you just taught the organization that broken work has no cost. The first cleanup was a favor. The second was expected. By the fifth, the broken work is arriving faster and with no apology at all. The people producing it face no consequences and never learn. Then one cleanup fails, or you get tired and miss something, and the history of successful rescues vanishes from the story. The single visible failure becomes the only thing anyone remembers. Stop absorbing broken work silently. Document what arrived broken and what you fixed, not as an accusation, as a record. Silent fixes make the fixer disposable. Let's have you keep an eye on that. You were kind of driving this one. Just make sure it doesn't fall through. You have heard these sentences 100 times, and you have never heard them for what they actually are. They are not casual phrases. They are the linguistic infrastructure of deferred blame. Vague ownership is ownership that can be stretched or shrunk later depending on how the outcome lands. If the work succeeds, the ownership was shared. If it fails, the ownership was yours the whole time. You heard the soft language as a trust signal and took it seriously, which is exactly what the person assigning it was counting on. They kept their hands free. You carried the risk. That's the setup. When someone hands you something with soft language, respond with hard language. A short email clarifying what the task actually is, what decisions you can make on your own, and where your responsibility ends. Ambiguity protects the person who assigned it, never the person who accepted it. The fifth trap is not about too much work. It is about the moment you say yes before you know what saying yes costs. Saying yes feels professional. Saying no feels like a flaw in your character. If your self-image is built on being the person who figures it out, every new request becomes a problem to solve instead of a resource to negotiate. The calendar fills, the quality drops slightly in places nobody is looking yet. Errors start appearing at the edges. Then, quality breaks somewhere visible, and the fact that you were carrying 3 times a reasonable load becomes irrelevant. What remains is the specific mistake, stripped of context. Your capacity is not a character defect. Treat it like the finite resource it is. When something new arrives, ask what it replaces. If the answer is nothing, that request is not a commitment. It is a trap waiting for its moment. Picture that meeting, the one where a decision is being made that you can already see is wrong, and you say nothing because arguing feels like being difficult, and you plan to just make it work anyway. Everyone in that room registered your silence as agreement. If you did not object to the timeline, you accepted it. If you did not push back on the scope, you endorsed it. If you did not flag the risk, you did not see it. Leadership moves fast in that meeting because nobody in the room is creating resistance. Then the decision produces a bad outcome, and your silence gets rewritten as co-ownership. Now it's yours. The counter is not to become difficult. It is to put concerns in writing, briefly, without heat, even when you plan to comply with a decision anyway. One sentence noting a risk is not insubordination, it is insurance. Silence is the most expensive form of politeness in corporate life. The 11th trap catches the most self-aware employees because it starts with genuine success. You solve a major problem, you stabilize a difficult account, you rescue a project everyone had written off. The praise is public and specific. Your manager says your name in front of their manager. For a few weeks, you live in a slightly warmer climate at work. Then the expectations change, and nobody announces the change. The level of performance that earned the praise becomes the new baseline. Anything below it now reads as decline. The hero phase lasts weeks. The new baseline lasts forever. What started as gratitude becomes pressure, and pressure becomes suspicion the first time you deliver normally instead of extraordinarily. That's when it flips. When you win something big, describe it as a specific intervention, not a new standard. Name the cost. Name the temporary conditions that made it possible. Name what you will not be doing next quarter because you did this one. Heroic framing is flattering in the moment and expensive afterward. Praise in corporate life is almost always a loan, and loans get called in. Every one of these traps does the same underlying thing. It converts your effort into someone else's optionality. The company gets flexibility. You get exposure. Avoiding this is not about working less or caring less. It is about refusing to let your work exist outside of a written, defensible framework. What follows is not motivation. It is how you stop being easy to use. Refuse invisible ownership. If a responsibility cannot be described in one sentence a stranger would understand, it is not a responsibility. It is a liability waiting to be assigned to whoever is standing nearest when it fails. Anytime something is handed to you informally, formalize it in writing the same day, even if the writing is just a short email saying, "Here is what I understood you to be asking for." Invisible ownership is always ownership that can be denied later by the person who created it. Put important things in writing. Not everything. Anything that could later become a subject of blame. A written record is not paranoia. It is the only reliable form of memory inside an environment where the story of what happened gets rewritten by whoever has the most to lose. If a conversation matters, summarize it afterward in a short message. If a decision is made verbally, put the reasoning somewhere it can be found 6 months from now. In 6 months, your written record will be the only version of events that still exists, and the people who remember it differently will remember it in whichever way hurts them least. Make trade-offs visible. Most scapegoating happens because the cost of a decision got absorbed privately, while the benefit got celebrated publicly. When you take on new work, state what it is displacing. When you agree to a tight deadline, state which part of the quality will suffer, and say so in writing. This is not negotiation. It is documentation of reality. Trade-offs that are invisible at the start become failures attributed to you at the end. Stop converting dysfunction into heroics. Every time you fix something silently that should not have been broken, you are teaching the organization that the breakage has no cost. You are also building a personal reputation as someone whose effort has no limit, which is the exact profile a scapegoat fits. Fixing problems is not the issue. Fixing them invisibly is. Leave the dysfunction in the record, briefly and without drama, but clearly enough that it cannot be edited out later by someone writing a different version of events. Correct the story early. Corporate narratives about individuals harden fast. Once a version of events has been circulating for 2 or 3 weeks, it becomes extremely difficult to dislodge, regardless of accuracy. When you notice a misrepresentation, address it the same week in a tone that is flat and factual. Early corrections look like clarifications. Late corrections look like complaints. Complaints do not travel well in organizations. Clarifications do. Build value that is respected, not just consumed. There is a difference between being useful and being valuable. Usefulness is a function of availability. Value is a function of scarcity and skill. Hardworking employees rely almost entirely on usefulness, which is why they are the first to be consumed and the first to be blamed. Invest in capabilities that are hard to replace. Make those capabilities visible in ways that connect to outcomes leadership actually cares about. A useful person gets used. A valuable person gets protected. The words sound similar. The outcomes do not. None of this will eliminate the risk of being scapegoated. The forces that create scapegoats are older than any individual career and stronger than any individual strategy. What these principles will do is tilt the odds in your favor. They will make you a more expensive target, a less convenient name, a harder story to write. In most cases, that is enough. Blame follows the path of least resistance. The work is to stop being that path. The hardworking employee who understands this stops measuring their standing by how much they contribute and starts measuring it by how protected their contribution is. That one move is what separates a long career from a cautionary one. You already know the people this has happened to. You have watched it play out in real time and told yourself it would never reach you because you work harder, because you care more, because you are the one who always delivers. That is the exact profile. That is why it happens. The organization is not looking for someone who failed. The organization is looking for someone it can afford to lose. And the reason your name keeps coming up in those conversations is not that you did something wrong. It is that you made yourself easy to replace by being too willing to be used. By the time you realize you are the one being discussed, the discussion is already over.